Welcome to Wisco Dies! Hey folks, this is the Cones You Do The Most. I'm coming at you with another little video here, a tutorial on how to paint the summer uniform on a World War II Russian. So here are the paints. I'm using Reaper paints. I'm going to start with a base coat for Terran Khaki, move to a Khaki Shadow for the depth, and then move on to a Khaki Highlight for the highlighting layer. So as we move in, I'll go ahead and first thing I needed to do, these models weren't on bases, so I needed to go ahead and pin them to cork stand so I didn't handle the model. It's very important when you're painting models not handle the model directly. You'll note that I kind of have these models also undercoated in kind of a yellowish tan brown. I just did that with the airbrush. If you don't have an airbrush and you're just going from like white or black primer, I definitely recommend this being a white primer. And if I was going to do this with a white primer, I would then wash the model immediately with like your just standard brown wash before going on and painting the model like I'm doing here, putting the base coats on. So right now I'm painting that Terran Khaki on this model, and that Terran Khaki is, if you're looking for the Reaper paint code, it's 09122. It doesn't take too long. You can kind of water this down a little bit. The Reaper paints are kind of nice. They take to water very well. They use a very fine pigment in their paints, and you can water it down a little bit. It doesn't need a lot of water to really get it to flow onto the model and get that base coat on. Okay, so now I'm going to move into this next step, is going in with the Khaki Shadow, and that's part code or paint code 09121 from the Reaper paint line. And I'm going in and just finding all the little cracks, crevices, places like where the collar lines, and basically anywhere where there's a line, where there should be a shadow, and painting in very carefully. Actually, not even that carefully. I'm just kind of applying paint pretty... I know it looks like I'm doing it fairly carefully, but it's not necessarily as careful as you'd think. It's alright to kind of smudge and have a little paint where you wouldn't want it at this point, because I'm going to ultimately go back over it with the highlight layer, and since these colors are close enough together, you can get away with a little bit of that highlight layer being about this, you can get away with putting up the highlight layer over the top of the base, the shadow color while you're highlighting and not have a major problem. So this is probably the least tedious, or not as, it's more tedious than putting the base coat on per se, but it's definitely not as tedious as the next stage, and it's definitely nothing complex. Alright, so I'm just going to go ahead and do this other model here quick, touch on there, there we go. Alright, so now we're going to move into the highlight layer. So I've got this this figure here, and I'm going to go ahead and start with a shoulder. I like to start with, when I'm doing the highlight layer, with a mix of watered down highlight color and straight highlight color on the palette, oftentimes kind of in just one big pool, and I'll half that pool, or that droplet of paint on the palette, on my wet palette, is watered down, and the other half is still straight paint. Now, this is going to be Khaki Highlight that I'm using. It's his paint code 09123, and I started with a shoulder. I like to start with the shoulder, one of the spots where the sun is probably going to be the most bright on the model, just because I tend to, this is just me personally, I tend to go a little too bright with those initial coats as I'm trying to get the feel, especially on the first time I'm hitting the model. If I'm doing a batch paint like I'm roughly doing here in this video. Now, when I'm doing this, I'm hitting all the raised areas. I'm using a little bit of watered down paint. It's kind of nice to start with a watered down paint to just kind of, it's because it's a little bit transparent, so you'll get some of the depth from behind to show through, and then as it's still a bit wet, like on the I do it especially in this particular model. I do it especially on this bedroll. I'll and on the back here, I'm going in with a wet paint, and then I'm going in right after it and heating it while the model is still a bit wet with wet paint on it, and heating it with the straight paint right out of the bottle, and it makes a nice top line that just blends very well. One of the things I see a lot is in models, and I'm not a master of this by any means, but the blending of the dark to highlight, and watering down your paint and then hitting the highest highlights while the model is still wet can really and then kind of blending that really bright highlight can really help you get your blend kind of perfected. It does take a little bit of practice, though, to get perfect. Alright, just about finished here with this coat on the model. Just found a few little spots I'd wanted to hit up a little bit better, as you can see, and there we go. It's pretty much finished. The summer uniform is done. Now, I took a picture of the figures so that you can kind of see the depth on the figures that I achieved using this technique. I hope you've used this, learned something from this video. Thanks for watching. Make sure you check out our website at wiscodice.com. For now, peace out.